Hi everyone, I'm Nick Olivo, and today we're going to look at one of my favorite low-level D&D monsters from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, the Gremishka. We'll learn about them, we'll see how to automate them in Roll20, and we'll learn why they'll become the creature that gives your low-level spellcasters nightmares. Now, we are going to be using mods throughout this video, so a pro account will be required to do what I'm about to show you. Before we dive in, I'd just like to thank Roll20 for sponsoring this video. Now, when your party is low level, like level 1 or 2, they come across a lot of goblins, kobolds, and zombies. And those are great staple monsters, but I like to vary things up for my players. Enter the Gremishka. These vicious little cat-like creatures are cunning hunters who love tormenting magic users. Let's take a quick look at their stat block. Coming in at CR 1/8, you can have a bunch of Gremishkas roll up on your party and not unbalance things. Much. More about that in a minute. They have dark vision and a bite attack that deals 1d4 piercing and 1d6 force damage, so a Gremishka's bite can hurt, especially when you figure that they're encountered in packs. But really, it's this magical allergy reaction that's going to freak your PCs out. Whenever a spell is cast within 30 feet of a Gremishka, it spontaneously reacts to that magic. You roll a die, and depending on the outcome, the Gremishka might unleash a wave of destructive force, it might heal itself, or it might explode into a swarm of Gremishkas, making the encounter much more deadly. So why is that Gremishka swarm bad? Well, for starters, it's resistant to non-magical physical damage, it's immune to a bunch of conditions, sure, that's bad, but it also automatically succeeds on saving throws for 3rd level spells or lower, and the attack rolls of such spells will always miss it. That means if your cleric casts Sacred Flame or your warlock casts Eldritch Blast, those will always do no damage. To the Gremishka swarm at least, and I call that out specifically because the swarm has a special reaction called spell redirection, which says that if a spell attack misses the swarm causes that spell to hit another creature of its choice within 30 feet. So that missed Eldritch Blast is going to get redirected to hit one of the warlock's companions, and the damage output of a swarm is nothing to sneeze at either. So, the potential for a single Gremishka to become a swarm is really what makes them scary, because it's not like the party just needs to avoid hitting the Gremishka with magical attacks. They cast anything within 30 feet and that allergy gets triggered. Your bard casts guidance on the rogue to help them pick a lock, magical allergy. Your wizard casts dancing lights so they can see what's in a room, magical allergy. This really spices up your low-level encounters, so just make sure you don't overdo it. Alright, so now that we've talked about the Gremishkas, let's see how we can automate that magical allergy in Roll20. So the first thing we need to do is install some mods into our game, and the first mod we're going to install is called Scriptcards, which comes to us from the amazing Kurt Jagers. This mod is what's going to do all of the logic and die rolls for the magical allergy reaction. We're also going to use Spawn Default Token, which comes to us from the fantastic David M. And Spawn Default Token will be used to spawn in the Gremishka Swarm token in the event that that is what happens as a result of their magical allergy. And then finally, you want to install the Metascript Toolbox, which comes to us from the Metamancer himself, Timoth. And the Metascript Toolbox has a whole bunch of things in it. It's going to install several other things into your game. Take them all. They are all extraordinarily useful, and this just makes it easy to ensure that we have everything that we need in order to do some of the other stuff that we need as part of this magical allergy reaction. And for those of you who haven't installed mods before, what you want to do is just click on this mod library, find the name of the mod in this box, and that will allow you to add it into your game. Alright, so with all of our mods added, let's dive into our game and let's start writing some code. So now that we have the mods installed, let's go into our game and let's make sure that we've added a Gremishka and a Gremishka swarm into our game. And you can do that just by putting in Gremishka into the compendium, and we're actually going to drag the Gremishka and the swarm of Gremishkas onto the battlefield. And also, this really awesome battle map that I'm using right now comes to us from Epic Quest battle maps, and the one I'm using comes from the Curse of the Night Hag map pack, and they make all these awesome battle maps and mood-setting video files that you can include as part of your game, so definitely check them out. I'll put a link to that down in the video description as well. Okay, back to our game. Once you got the tokens on the board, you can actually just delete the swarm of Gremishkas from the battlefield. We won't need that again, but we are going to keep our regular Gremishka in here. In fact, I may want to duplicate this multiple times, but for right now, just having the one is all I need. So let's see what it's going to look like when all is said and done here. I'm going to switch over to the chat tab. I'm going to click on my Gremishka. We're going to have a magical allergy button that we click on, and it automatically displays in chat what's happened as a result of that magical allergy. The Gremishka sneezes, and in this case, the Gremishka surges with magical energy and regains 3 hit points. And those hit points will be automatically applied back to the token, and the script will be smart enough to know not to overheal the Gremishka. So, let's see how we actually write the code for this. I'm going to swing over my trusty Notepad++ window here, and I'll scroll so I have my Gremishka in view. And the first thing we want to do is put in the line that says script, and then 2 open curly braces, and then 2 closing curly braces. This is telling Roll20 that everything between these 2 sets of curly braces is part of our script card. Now what we want to do is display the title of the script card, Magical Allergy, and that's going to be done with a line that looks like this, -- title, Magical Allergy. We also want to grab the selected token, the Gremishka that we currently have highlighted, and we can do that with a line that looks like this, where we say -- Gremishka token, and what we're basically doing here is we're saying grab the selected token's ID and assign that to this Gremishka token variable. And what that's going to allow us to do is refer back to this token so we can do things like heal it when it surges with magical energy and regains HP, or so we can hide it on the GM layer should it explode into a swarm of Gremishkas. Next up, we want to put in that little bit of flavor text saying that the Gremishka sneezes violently. There's nothing in the stat block that says they actually sneeze, but I figure it's an allergy, right? You're gonna sneeze, and besides, I think having this hideous little cat creature sneeze right before it does something horrific is just really cute and kind of fun. So let's go ahead and let's put a line in like that, and we're going to say -- and pipe, and that's what's going to allow us to output that line, the Gremishka sneezes violently, into the script card. So now what we want to do is actually roll the die to determine which allergic reaction that the Gremishka is going to have to the spell that's being cast. So if we pop over to the Gremishka's stat block, we see that we're rolling a d6, but there's really only 3 effects that we can have. Either the Gremishka sends out a wave of force and deals force damage, the Gremishka can heal, or the Gremishka explodes, dies, and turns into a swarm of Gremishkas. But because there's only 3 effects here, we really don't need to roll a d6 for this. We can roll a d3. I mean, if we were playing in person, of course, you roll a d6, because I know I don't have any d3 dice. I know they exist, but none of them are at my table. So yeah, you'd roll a d6. But in a virtual tabletop, we can roll any number die that you want. You want to roll a d37? Go for it. So what we'll do is roll a d3, and then depending on what gets rolled, we will have our Gremishka have that particular allergic reaction. So back to our code, what we're going to do is add a line that looks like this, where we're going to roll our d3, and we're going to store the result of that d3 in this variable here called allergy. And now what we want to do is look at what we rolled for the allergy and have the appropriate effect take place. So we can do that with a line that looks like this. So this -- is a case statement. And what that means is we're going to look at the value of the allergy variable. And if it's a 1, the Gremishka is going to deal force damage. If it's a 2, the Gremishka is going to heal itself. And if it's a 3, the Gremishka is going to burst and turn into a swarm of Gremishkas. So that's great. So now let's define what actually happens when we're dealing force damage, when we're healing, or when we're turning into a swarm. So what we're going to do now is define a subroutine. And the first subroutine we define is going to be called force. So if we roll a 1, we're going to jump down into this subroutine, and we're going to do whatever is between this marker and this marker right here. So this is the force subroutine, everything between here and here. And so what are we going to do when we're dealing force damage? Well, the first thing we need to do is roll a d6 to figure out how much force damage we're actually dealing. So we're rolling that d6 and we're going to store it in a variable called force damage. And then once we've determined how much force damage we're dealing, we want to display that out to our users in chat. And we can do that with a line that looks like this. So -- plus and the pipe, this is just like what we saw up here in the original message where we're sneezing. We're writing this text out to the chat, and we need to say that each creature within 30 feet of the Gremishka must succeed on a DC 10 con save, or they're going to take, however much damage we rolled, points of force damage. Once we've finished all the lines of code that make up the subroutine, this line tells script cards to return back to the original statement. So we would continue execution from here. But the problem is, if we do that, we're actually going to run the force call again. So what we really want to do is check to see which of these values we got, run the appropriate subroutine, and then exit. So to do that, we're going to add one more line right here, --x. And what that does is tell script cards, okay, we rolled force, come down here, do the force damage subroutine, come back, exit the card. All right, so now let's do the other subroutines. Okay, we want to do the heal one next. So that's going to start out exactly the same as what we saw with force. We've got our -- and then heal. And I'm going to actually make this a little bit bigger so we can see more on the screen at once. And then again, we're going to have another line here to do the return. And now the first thing we want to do in the heal routine is figure out how much we're healing. So very similar to what we did with the force damage, we're going to roll a d6 and store that in the recovered HP variable here. And then we want to tell our players that this has happened. So we're going to have another line, just like what we saw in the force routine, where the Gremishka surges with magical energy and regains that many hit points. And that will just be displayed in chat. But we also want to actually apply that healing to our Gremishka's token. And so to do that, what we're going to do is put in a line like this. This -- T means we're going to take the token that we're specifying here. In this case, it's the selected token, the Gremishka, and we're going to update its bar 1 value, which is the bar that typically contains the HP, by however many hit points that we rolled. So if our Gremishka had 3 hit points and we rolled a 6, it's going to add 6 to that 3 and it'll have 9 hit points. Now, the challenge this could introduce is we don't want the Gremishka to overheal. So if it has 9 hit points and it rolls a 6 on its healing, we don't want it to have 15 hit points. It maxes out at 10. So what we want to do now is add a line into the card that will prevent us from overhealing the Gremishka. That line's going to look like this, and I'm actually going to put it up towards the top of the card because it's more of a card-wide setting. And what we're saying here is limit max bar values, and we're setting that to 1. When we set it to anything really other than 0, what it's saying is that the script card cannot adjust a bar's value beyond its defined maximum. So the Gremishka has a maximum HP of 10, so we can never set that bar higher than 10. And now finally, we want to create the swarm subroutine. So to do that, again, it's going to be -- and then swarm with a pipe, and then -- return statement. And the first thing we want to do is, again, put the flavor text saying that the Gremishka has exploded into a swarm of Gremishkas. And then what we want to do is take the original Gremishka token, and we want to hide that on the GM layer. So to do that, we're going to use a line like this, where again, we say --T, so we're working with a token. The token that we're working with is the Gremishka token, the selected token. And what we're going to do is set the layer of that token to the GM layer. And then the final statement is going to look like this. And there's a lot going on in this statement, so let's break it down here. What we're saying here is --at. This means we are calling another mod. And the mod that we're going to use is Select Manager. Select Manager is one of the metascripts that was installed via the metascript toolbox. So what we're saying is for the selected token, we're going to call the spawn command, which is the spawn default token mod that I had you install earlier. And what that's going to do is say spawn in a swarm of Gremishkas in the exact same location as our original Gremishka, but put them on the token layer. So if we swarm, we display this text, we hide the Gremishka on the GM layer, and we summon in a swarm token. All right, so this is everything that makes up our script card. So what I'm going to do now is select all this, copy it, and what we'll do is open up our Gremishka's character sheet. I'm just going to Alt double click on it here. Go to Attributes and Abilities, go to Add, and we're going to create an ability. We'll call it Magical Allergy. Paste in our code, save it. And now show as token action. And I'll take the done one off here so that we aren't looking at that. And now we'll select our Gremishka's token. There's our magical allergy button. And let's go ahead and click it. All right, and there we go. It exploded and turned into a swarm of tiny Gremishkas. And we can see right there, we have hidden our original one. If I move this guy, you can see that the original Gremishka has been hidden on the GM layer. And it brought in the swarm of Gremishkas. And if let's delete them. Let's bring this guy back to the token layer. And if we run it again, okay, it sneezed again. Remember, we got a 1 in 3 chance that it's going to turn into a swarm. So this is working properly. And now we're ready to antagonize our spellcasters with Gremishkas in our next game. So there you go, Gremishkas and how to automate their magical allergy effect in Roll20. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing. And if you do employ Gremishkas against your players, drop a note down in the comments and let me know how it went. In the meantime, folks, thanks for watching and have a great day.